just, ooh, no. Anyone who is trying to say that we are all Ballerina Farm. No. Yeah, I was not planning on going here. It's not true crime, at least not yet. But it is Latter-day Saint, and I am getting so tired of this crap I'm seeing online about how Latter-day Saints are all cults and blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're all brainwashed women who were oppressed. So this is my response. Okay. Normally, on True Crime, Faith, and Chocolate, we go into religious true crime. Somehow when those two things intersect. To this point, we've been discussing Latter-day Saint true crime. I am a Latter-day Saint, if you haven't guessed that already. And yeah, if you haven't read the Ballerina Farm article, I suggest you do that. It's very well done, and it's also incredibly disturbing. And I'm saying that as an active Latter-day Saint. Okay, no. This is not normal. Just the highlights that to me were red flags in their relationship, and speaking as an active member, okay? So he actually stalked her to get a first date. She grew up in Springville, Utah, which is a bit south of Salt Lake, also south of Provo, BYU, half the same town that Chad Daybell grew up in. She got into Juilliard to study ballet, and she had a dream of becoming a professional ballerina, and she was on that path. She was very good. And that alone, in my mind, should tell you that women aren't entirely oppressed if her family was cool with that. Going to the big city, going to New York, and becoming a ballerina. She's in Utah, where he is. He asks her out, and she says no. She's heading back to New York, and he ends up with, oh my goodness, the very next seat next to her on the plane. Oh my goodness, how'd that happen? And he goes, yeah, I made a call. Daniel, is the heir to the JetBlue fortune. I don't know if she was flying JetBlue or one of his dad's other airlines, but he could pull some strings and he got the seat next to her, which to me is like a stalking way to get a date, to force her to sit next to you for 5 hours or whatever. But that was their first date, when she actually said no. So on top of that, then he was not cool with her finishing her degree because the long distance relationship was not going to work. Dude, of all people on this planet, long distance travel is not going to be a financial burden for you. You can fly free. And even if you couldn't, dude, you could afford a first class tickets by snapping your fingers because of who your dad is. This is not a problem. You could have totally made this work, but he pressured her and somehow she caved. He seems very controlling to me. He's messed up. Now, culturally, yes, this happens at times. It's not everybody by a long shot. I think it used to be more common decades ago, but the current generation, heck no. They start dating. He pressures her into getting engaged quickly. She does. She becomes the first person in Juilliard to be pregnant, and she ends up having to drop out.
No! No!
And then they both sacrifice, supposedly, to create this dream of a cattle ranch in Camas, Utah. So for those who don't know Camas, that's where Katherine Heigl also has a ranch. She was raised LDS as well. It's kind of, it's definitely a rural area, but it's not too far from like Park City. So people can fly out through there, usually with private jets. For those who are somewhat local, if you go through Provo Canyon, you'll hit Heber. And then if you go a little bit farther to go camping, say up in the Uintas, you'll usually drive through Camas, if that's kind of gives you the layout there. So that's where their little ranch is. So it's not too far from civilization, but it is kind of rural in its own thing. They seem to be just popping out kids almost as fast as she can produce them, which is again disturbing because no, we do not ban birth control at all. We're known for large families because we believe in families. That is a big thing. I have 3 siblings. I did grow up in an area where I had people in my congregation had much larger families. Ironically, I had a high school friend with a very large family who, bless her heart. And this is where some of the culture stuff can come in and become problematic. She actually said, how can you think you have a real family when you only have 3 siblings? I did not hit her. I didn't know what to say to that because when my family lived in Helsinki, we were the freaks with the large families. I don't know what to tell you. There were things, the fact that she has 8 children and the oldest is what, like 10 or 11, I think. That's, oh goodness. On the one hand, not every woman could physically do that. Yay for her if she wants to and can. It sounds like she may have drunk some Kool-Aid to make her think that's what she wants. I don't know. Every 9 months after a baby is born. So that's, and she gives birth at home without an epidural or any kind of pain management. And yay for her for being able to do that. Some women do have easy labors. I know one woman who, she had 3 kids. They were all very easy deliveries. And she thought, oh, goodness, women are always complaining about childbirth. That was not a big deal. Women, don't be wimps. Then her 4th delivery was absolute hell. It was just absolutely heinous. She quickly realized that she had been judging and didn't know what she was talking about. And then she had compassion because she thought if all of my deliveries had been like my last one, I wouldn't have had 4. So I suspect she has easier deliveries than some. But she did have 2 children in the hospital with epidurals. The journalist makes a point of saying that she seems to not be able to get the wife, Hannah, alone to talk to her directly without her husband, Daniel, hovering and inserting his 2 bits. And Hannah doesn't seem like she can just answer freely when he's around. Granted, this is the journalist's perception, but considering how he essentially stalked her into marrying him, to me, that tracks. She admits to having had at least 1, I think 2 epidurals, and when he's in the other room on a phone call, she admits, yeah, it was kind of great. And when I read that, my heart just dropped. They also had a barn that was supposed to be reserved for her to have a ballet studio inside it, but it has been converted into where the children have their homeschooling. She's entered a bunch of beauty pageants. If that's what she wants to do with herself and her body, power to her. She did one just, I think, 12 days after giving birth. And she goes, oh, fortunately, I had stopped bleeding, which I'm like, okay, you're lucky on that, because most of us bleed for 4 to 6 weeks. And did a beauty pageant? How is that even possible? Because her body must just bounce back. Must just be a genetic thing. I got the impression that she got into beauty pageants as a way to do something with one of her sisters. To me, that says it's a way to escape, be away from home for a while, although with a nursing child attached to you, and away from her husband, perhaps. I don't think it's necessarily something she felt pressured into. To me, I thought that probably was an escape, my opinion. The journalist asked, oh, so well, where are your beauty pageant dresses? Well, they used to be in this closet here, but then the kids' stuff they were taking up too much space, so my husband put them in the garage. There just seems to be so much disrespect among this couple. And this is, again, coming from an active member of their same faith, supposedly, but they are very extreme. This is not normal. If you've seen the egg apron video, I don't know why they thought it would be a good idea to post that. They posted it. It's Hannah's birthday and she's opening her birthday present from her husband, and every other thing out of her mouth is, oh, is it tickets to Greece? She wants a trip to Greece. And then she opens it and she sees some fabric and she goes, ooh, is it a hat to wear to Greece? Opens it up. It's an egg apron, which I didn't even know what that was until I saw this video. It's an apron you wear with all of these little pockets. So when you are collecting your eggs, you can put them in the pockets. And she goes, oh, it's an egg apron. He goes, yeah, it's from Ukraine. I've had it for forever. She goes, oh, it's cute. And then he says, you're welcome. Oh, thanks, honey. He knew she wanted a trip to Greece and he can afford it. And she instead gets this stupid egg apron. But that's not remotely what she wanted. Could she have gotten both, perhaps? I don't. There's more to the article. That's just some of my personal annoying highlights. I think it is incredibly problematic, their relationship, from what I have seen. It's very upsetting. People are saying that this is evidence that the Mormon Church is a cult. Okay, we're almost 20 million of us. That's not a cult, number one. Number two, since the beginning, the church has emphasized education for women. Female doctors, female politicians. Some of the first in the nation came from us. We were at one point considered incredibly liberal. I know that sounds crazy today, but by old standards, that was a liberal idea. Are there cult elements in some circles? Unfortunately, yes. There are those. But you also will find them in other groups. I think a couple of generations ago, as I said, you'll find more of this June Cleaver mentality of, moms belong in the kitchen. And there are some very conservative people that are in my opinion, are very overly conservative and in that mindset. It is not the bulk of us. It is not remotely the majority. But for example, I knew a girl in high school whose family did not use vanilla extract because they had alcohol in it, who were worried about one of their daughters' salvation because she had pierced her ears, permed her hair, was the 80s, and was wearing makeup. That is not us. That is not us. We all thought that is the most bizarre thing I have ever heard. How crazy. After she got married, very young, I got a Christmas letter that literally, and this still makes me so mad. They hadn't been able to have children for some time. Christmas letter, it says, oh, she's quit her job so she can be home where she belongs. She had no children. So there was that argument was gone. I was like, a woman's place is literally in the home, even when she has no children to take care of. Are you out of your ever-loving mind? Who are you? That is not what we believe. That just pissed me off. I cannot even express. You want to see the really culty, far fringy things? Read Educated by Tara Westover. That is the fringe side of things. And she actually does kind of show the mainstream Latter-day Saint faith pretty well. The fact that she went to BYU and suddenly was confronted with the real world as much as BYU is, and he had friends who drank Pepsi, and oh my gosh, what? No, caffeine is not against our dietary code. It's not. A lot of people think it is, but it is not. That would just be coffee. So yes, there are cult-like elements amongst certain circles, especially in past generations. And when I hear people who have left the church and say, well, this was my experience, and how dare you discount my experience and say it's not real, I say, I believe you 100%. I have seen these people, like my high school friend, who did grow up in a cult-like environment within the church. But the Venn diagram is not a circle. Okay, you get these really crazy people, and that's just a small little bubble within a much greater whole. And when you start complaining about certain policies or even doctrines or even ordinances that seem kind of misogynistic, so much of that has changed. So if you have left the church and start complaining about X, Y, and Z, and I say, well, X actually that's not a thing anymore, that has changed, how dare you question my experience? How dare you? And I'm like, your understanding and knowledge of the church ended when you left, and things have changed since you left. And that's a good thing, and you're fine not coming back. But if you haven't been here and you don't know the changes, stop complaining that we haven't changed, because certain things have changed. A lot has changed. When I was growing up, there was a push for mothers to be at home, and yet also to get an education. I remember very distinctly being probably 13, 14, and even then, I wanted to be a writer. And I thought if I needed to have a, quote, day job, I would be an English teacher in high school. And I thought, oh, I am so glad that my passion lines up with being a stay-at-home mom. Even a school teacher, that would line up with my kids' school schedules. And thinking, I am so glad that my passion isn't microbiology or medicine. Because then what would I do? I'm also Gen X, and I'm 50, and I have grandkids, and things have changed. Getting an education was incredibly important in my family growing up. I did get married on the younger end, as a lot of us Latter-day Saints do. We were planning on waiting a couple of years to have kids, and then we both just felt we were supposed to start already. And yes, matter of prayer type of thing, laugh all you want, but we did feel like, oh my goodness, I think we are supposed to have a kid already. That was not in our original plan. Before we officially made that decision, I sat down and made sure I could still graduate from college with my bachelor's degree. So I sat down with the book of all the classes, as it was an actual book back then. I figured out that if I dropped my secondary education licensing and my minor, and I got pregnant that very day, I could still graduate. And then if I didn't get pregnant right away, I would add my minor back. And if I took a little bit longer, then I would add the secondary licensing back. I did get pregnant pretty quickly. And then the question was, how do I tell my parents I'm pregnant? I want them to be happy. And so this is how I did it, because education was so important. Mom and Dad, guess what? I'm graduating earlier than we thought. I led with that because I knew if I just said, Mom, I'm pregnant, my parents would be like, what about your education? What the heck? Both of my parents are silent generation. They're older than boomers. And yet it was that important for me to get my degree. So that's how I grew up. So something I've seen, oh my gosh, people today saying, oh, Black people are not allowed to be at the highest levels of leadership because in the next life they're supposed to be our slaves. I literally have no idea where the slave part comes from. Like, I can guess where some of the other thoughts came from, but not that one. That unless Brigham Young or someone taught that on the side. 1978 happened. That policy changed completely. Up until that point, actually Brigham Young to that point, because Joseph Smith actually did give leadership and priesthood callings and ordinations to Black men. Brigham Young stopped that, and then that was the policy until 1978. But after 1978, Black men could do anything a white man could. Now, do we have a Black man in the highest levels of leadership? Not quite yet. And let me show you how some of the leadership works. The highest level of leadership is a lifelong thing. When you're called there, usually is when you're retired and older, but it's until you die. And so those leaders, they turn over very, very slowly. Our current prophet is about to have his 100th birthday. Okay, and he's still pretty spry. Change is happening. It just takes time. So we have the first presidency, which is the prophet, and he has 2 counselors, and then there's the 12 apostles. Are any of them Black? No. The next level down, however, does have a Black man. It's 7 men who are considered the presidency of the 70, which is then the quorums below that. And there's 100-ish of those 70s. Now, of the 100-ish, spent so much time looking at stats and data. I didn't dig into specifics on this because I thought other parts are more important. But just looking at the names of the 70, it looks about a third of them are ethnic names. So, not like Parker and Smith and Johnson that seem very European white. And looking at a picture, there are, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of like 10 clearly Black 70s, and then about another 20 or so who look ethnic something else, say like Polynesian or Asian or something like that. So about a third of the 70 at this point are ethnic outside of the US white Caucasian European heritage, which I think that is actually pretty good that we're heading in that direction. That's pretty good, I think, for an institution that moves slowly. Yeah, Elder Dubé is the one who our president of the 70, one of those 7. 4 of the 7 are whitey McWhitersons, but 2 of them are from Utah only. In past years, that would have been all of them from Utah. Only 2 of the 7. And the other white guys, one is from Washington State, the other is from New Zealand, so not even US. The other 3, Portugal, Mexico, and Zimbabwe. That's Elder Dubé. 4 out of the 7 are not from the United States. A majority of the presidency of the 70 are not from the United States. The first presidency, president, and then his 2 counselors, they're all the white guys at this point. The first presidency tends to be sort of a training ground for those who might become prophet, and the way it's a seniority, not by age, but by how long you've been in the quorum of the 12. Like when you were first ordained an apostle, that establishes your order and seniority. At this point, we have Russell M. Nelson. He's president. Next in line in seniority is Oakes. He's one of the counselors, and the other counselor is Eyring, who was next in line after Oakes. This is the first time Oakes has ever been in a first presidency, which is unusual. He was called in the 80s, and he had never been in the first presidency. And so a lot of people were actually up in arms when Nelson became president and did not have Uchtdorf, who was born in Czechoslovakia and was a World War II refugee. He was in the first presidency, but then when President Nelson came in, he called Oakes instead. And some people thought, oh, they're demoting Uchtdorf. The reality is Uchtdorf probably had a different assignment because the 12 all have very specific assignments across the planet. It's a very big job that they have to do. But also Oakes had never been in a first presidency, and he's next in line. So that's a lot. It's definitely training ground for him. So that if he becomes the next prophet, and he will, unless he dies before Nelson, that he needs to know how to do that, and he hadn't yet. After the first presidency, we have Holland, Holland is fantastic. He's one of the most liberal, loving, charitable, Christ-like men on the planet. We love him, but his health has not been great in the last few years. I don't expect we will have him too much longer. And then Uchtdorf is after him. So I think it's very possible we could have Uchtdorf as president at some point, which I think would be fantastic. It'd be the first foreign president. And I'm not counting early in the church history. We have everyone was an immigrant because they had all come from England or Denmark or wherever. But I'm talking about once the church was established and those immigrants weren't, it was coming from the Utah stock or whatever, that he's the first one that was from abroad, first apostle. However, we have more than that now. The four most recently ordained apostles. Dale G. Renlund, he came in 2015. So we've had 4 in 9 years. So that, again, it'll be a while. He is also not of pioneer stock, though. He's a white dude, but both of his parents are immigrants from Finland and Sweden. And since I'm half Finnish, as is he, yay, I love him. He's actually fantastic. He also worked in cardiac and heart transplants. He has one child, a daughter, one. And his wife is hardly a demure cult-following woman. This is in the 70s. She went to law school, practiced law, and became the president of a law firm. The International Center for Law and Religious Studies says about her. This is just part of her bio. The attorney Ruth Libert Renlund is former president of the law firm Dusnap King and Olson, a firm she helped form and where she practiced plaintiff civil litigation for 20 years. Before this, she was for 3 years Assistant Attorney General of the state of Utah and served on the board of directors for the Deseret News, Murdoch Travel, and Workers' Compensation Fund of Utah. She was a member of the Utah Supreme Court's Committee on Professionalism and chair of the Judicial Conduct Committee for the state of Utah. She was the first female president of the Utah Trial Lawyers Association. This is in the 70s. She had one child who she put into daycare, and she went to school, law school, and then worked as a lawyer while her husband was doing church leadership and medical school. Also, let's go back up just a little bit. Let's talk just a little bit about President Nelson. So, his first wife, Dancel, is from everything I've read, she was a lovely, very wonderful, sweet, kind woman. She kind of did fit into the Mormon ideal of like stay-at-home mom pumping out kids. They had 10 children together, 9 daughters, and then a son as a caboose. She did, though, have a degree of her own. She was a huge part of making sure that her husband kept pursuing the science of cardiac surgery. He, and a lot of people don't know this, but he was instrumental. When he went to medical school, the heart, you didn't touch the heart physically with your hands. That just was believed that would kill a person. Heart surgery was not a thing. He was on the team that helped develop the heart-lung bypass. Anything cardiac we have today, thank you, President Nelson. He was working on developing the surgery, and some children had died as they didn't survive it. They would have died because of their conditions eventually, but they didn't make it through the surgery, and he came home and just wept. And his wife said, "You need to get back in there and keep doing this, because at some point you'll figure this out and save lives." And he was so convinced that the God that he knows, he created the earth, he created the universe, the scientific laws that govern everything. If I can figure out the laws that govern the body and the heart, I can figure out how to do surgery on a heart. It was his faith in God that helped him decide that there was science that he could figure out and learn and to save lives. And how many literal millions of lives has he saved because of the things that he learned? Now, I'm going to get emotional here because one of those people that he saved is my grandson. Days he had open heart surgery and he survived. But when he was getting put on the bypass machine, I about broke down. And just all I could think of was, thank you, President Nelson, for helping to invent the technology. This a chance to live. She wasn't like a medical school widow, as we think of today. Medical training in his day was very different from what it is today. He was able to finish his bachelor's degree when he was 20. He had his medical degree at 22. I mean, that's not even possible today. You have to do a 4-year degree, a 4-year medical school, then you have your residency or an internships and whatever, we're talking 15, 20 years sometimes to be specialized. When he was 29, 30-ish, he finished his residency in Minnesota and got a PhD in surgery. And then he worked as a cardiac surgeon for 30 years, from 1954 to 1984, from the ages of 30 to 60, when he was called as an apostle. And he was actually, as a surgeon, he was called to operate on the then prophet, President Kimball. And I cannot imagine the stress of that moment. So Dancel died in her 70s. A few years later, President Nelson remarried. named Wendy Watson Nilsson. And I personally feel that she has been instrumental in when she was supposed to be his wife, his second wife. There's so many things that have changed, so many areas of the church that have helped women. And I believe it's because, not because he's not a good man, because he is such a good man, but he literally, I don't think even members often think of it in these terms, but if you look back at our history, this is, and even in scripture, book, Bible and everything, revelation, like answers to prayer come when you ask you say the prayer. Oftentimes God's not just going to try to yell in your ear something you're supposed to know. You have to say, well, what about this? I don't understand this. Here's a problem. And then maybe you can find an answer, like cardiac surgery. I personally think that a lot of the changes that we have seen in recent years are because suddenly he's married to a woman, because of Wendy. Let me tell you who Wendy Watson Nilsson is. This is her first marriage. She was a career woman. She became a nurse. She got her RN from Calgary General Hospital College of Nursing. She got a bachelor's degree from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. That degree was in psychology. And then she got a master's degree from BYU in marriage and family therapy. Again, she was not married, but she was a therapist and a nurse. Then she got a PhD from the University of Calgary as well, where she became a professor. Later, she became a professor at BYU, and she was also a therapist throughout this time. And she developed a lot and published papers about therapy in nursing and how to some models to really help families. She was single until 2006. No children. No word on if she has ever owned cats. In my mind, I personally believe that President Nilsson is suddenly seeing the perspective of a woman who has had a career, a successful career, has had a wonderful life without a husband and without children. She has a perspective that he has never even considered. He didn't have access to it necessarily on the personal level he does now. So now he has this perspective and can ask those questions that can get the revelation and can get the answers and the direction and changes that we need. That is my opinion of why things have changed so rapidly in the last 10 plus years. We needed someone like Wendy Watson Nilsson to be in the position that she is in to influence her husband. And yes, women in leadership, that's another conversation. I'm not going there today. Back to the Quorum of the 12. It's no longer just a club for white men in Utah. So again, Uchtdorf, he's the fourth in line to the presidency. Recent form are not from pioneer stock. I already talked about Renlund. But the next one is Elder Gong. He is Chinese American. Then after him, we have Elder Suarez. He is from Brazil. And then we have Elder Kieran, who is from England. I believe Elder Suarez and Elder Kieran are both converts. I know Kieran is a convert in his 20s. Moving on to women in leadership. And we have a ways to go. We have more we can do, but we come a long way. The Relief Society, as it is called, is the women's organization in the church. And the current president, the general president over the entire Relief Society, so all the women in the church, her name is Camille N. Johnson. She has a bachelor's degree in English, and she has a law degree, and she practiced law for nearly 30 years. Even though she grew up in Pocatello, Idaho, which is one of the more conservative areas, she had practiced law for 30 years. And she has 3 children. 3. Her second counselor, Kristen M. Lee, is single. She has 2 undergraduate degrees and a master's degree in public administration. She worked as an artist and producer at Disney Interactive Studios, and now she works for the church as a manager of special projects in the publishing services department. In the Young Women Organization, this is ages 12 to 18, the current second counselor in the general presidency is Andrea Munoz Spanaus, and I probably slaughtered that name. She is from Argentina, and she has 2 children and a bachelor's degree. The primary organization, that is for children ages 3 up to 12 when they go into the youth. President is Susan H. Porter. She has a bachelor's degree in chemistry, and she used to work at MIT. She has 4 children. One of her counselors, Amy A. Wright, also has a bachelor's degree, and she worked as an office manager at Marquette University in the College of Communications, and then among other places, she has 3 children. The second counselor in the primary general presidency is Tracy Y. Browning, and she is a Black woman. She grew up in Jamaica, New York, and New Jersey, studied at St. John's University, worked in financial services for 15 years, and now works in account services, I don't know for how many years. 2 children. Past leadership, just a couple of quick ones, some of my personal favorites. Sharon Eubank. She was the first counselor in the General Relief Society presidency. She was called in 2017 and was released about a year ago, I believe. She got a bachelor's degree in English, has never married. She taught English as a second language in Japan, worked as a legislative aide in the US Senate. At one point was an entrepreneur. She owned an educational retail store, and then she became the director of Latter-day Saint Charities, which is the humanitarian arm of the church. So this is a quote from the church website. Since 1998, she has been employed by the church's welfare department, helping establish church employment offices in Africa and Europe before directing the Latter-day Saint Charities Wheelchair Initiative. In 2008, she was also asked to oversee humanitarian work in the Middle East as the regional director of Latter-day Saint Charities. She is freaking phenomenal and amazing. Never married, no children. Again, no word if she has any cats. And I'm going to point out this little card right here. See that card? Can't see it too well, but that is the Relief Society seal. So that is official letterhead. That is a card from Sarah Newbank, praising one of my books. So for that lady who thinks I'm not actually a faithful member. So when I was a young woman, the general president was Arditha G. Cap. She was married, had no children. She has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. When I was a young wife and mother, we had our first non-white member of the Relief Society presidency, Chieko Okazaki. She is fantastic. I absolutely love her. She served as the first counselor from 1990 to 1997. She was the first person of color to serve in a general organization presidency. She was raised in Hawaii and raised Buddhist. She was the daughter of Hawaii-born parents of Japanese descent. She was baptized into the church at the age of 15, and then she became an elementary school teacher and later a principal. One of the other things that was driving me bonkers about some of the reporting on the whole Ballerina Farm crap was a reference to another art. It was a thread on Twitter and a link to this other article quoting supposedly a section of the church's website that used to give makeup tips. And I was like, what in the actual crap? If the church website had a section on makeup tips, I would have known about it. And I'm thinking, what the crap are they talking about? And they said it used to, so it's not there anymore. The way it's phrased, that little part they quoted says, while you are not required to wear makeup, something like that. And then it had like tips about under eye circles, concealer, and maybe eyeshadow or something like that. And again, I'm thinking that does not make sense because even the dressing grooming guidelines for the youth used to be a little more specific, but it was like, don't wear extreme things and wear clothes that cover your body and aren't too tight, that kind of thing. So I thought, okay, maybe it was an old article from like the youth magazine called The New Era from like the 70s or something. Or maybe it's an old speech that happened, the text happened to be on the church's website, because the church's website is huge. There's so much on there. We're talking general conference talks that are like 5 sessions, which is like each session is 2 hours long, twice a year, going back to like 1970. The video of all of the speakers, the written text of that, all the magazines going back at least that far as well. There's a children's magazine, there's the youth magazine, there's the adult magazine. Then there's all kinds of other books, scriptures, study helps, videos. There's so much stuff on the church website. And then on top of that, you get things like Family Search and Roots Tech and all of these other things. And that's also under the church website umbrella. So I'm thinking, what in the world are they talking about as far as this makeup tips? And then it dawned on me. It was almost certainly, and I'm sure we can have viewers confirm this, it was almost certainly a few years ago, they were kind of opening up a little bit more on how much sister missionaries could wear. Like they could actually wear slacks instead of just dresses, especially in areas where like say mosquito populations and the Zika virus was a problem to help protect them. Or where things were very cold, you could bundle up better. And then it was also like, oh, you can wear more bright colors perhaps than you used to. And that makes sense as far as the line of you are not required to wear makeup, because missionaries are given such strict rules that if there was makeup suggestions, some missionaries would probably think it's required. And so they had to specifically say not required, but you can wear makeup. You know, they were encouraging both men and young women serving missions to give some effort to their appearance, knowing that there are representatives. And so they get, at one point, they actually had some pictures of like, here's some cute little outfits. And here's some makeup tips, I think. That's what I'm betting it is from, was just this brand new, here are some suggestions. There's never been makeup tips on the church website like that, like for just like anybody. Like Is there a problem with people wanting to have this appearance? Like culturally, we need to not be so obsessed with appearance. It drives me crazy when people get like a portion of something kind of right, and then they just go off into this weird place and like assume that the church used to have this whole makeup section, and that's somehow telling you about the culture. And no, that is not remotely accurate. Here's the current guidance for youth. Again, 12 to 18, on dress, grooming, tattoos, and piercings. So it says, the Lord's standard is for you to honor the sacredness of your body, even when that means being different from the world. Let this truth and the Spirit be your guide as you make decisions, especially decisions that have lasting effects on your body. Be wise and faithful and seek counsel from your parents and leaders. So there's nothing specific anymore. It's not even like, there used to be a time where only one pair of pierced earrings. That's gone now, and it's not like anti-tattoo either. It's like just be thoughtful and be aware. Take these decisions seriously. We're moving, we're changing. Is change happening as fast as a lot of us would like? No, but it's coming. And for an organization that moves as slow as we do, we've gone light speed in the last 20 years. So my dad has a PhD, my mother has a bachelor's degree. As I said, there are 4 children in my family of origin. All 4 of us have at least a bachelor's degree. One has a Master of Fine Arts, one has a Master of Public Administration. Our spouses all have at least a bachelor's degree. My husband has a master's degree, and my brother's wife does us all. She's an RN, so as well as an NP, nurse practitioner. She has a bachelor's degree, and she has a PhD in nursing. And she is an associate dean of nursing. 2 of my daughters have bachelor's degrees. Both of those children are married, and one is the mother of 2. But she works as a math teacher. And the other one is an entrepreneur, and she's been married for 3 years and no children. 2 quick things. I'm going to just a little quick story from my own experience as a mother of daughters, and then a quick little clip from one of our talks from General Conference speech from President Gordon B. Hinckley given 2001, so more than 23 years ago, given specifically to young women. It's like a minute and a half long, but I think it's important and relevant because this is the messaging coming from the top, not this Ballerina Farm cultish 1950s nonsense. When one of my daughters, this is the one who is now an entrepreneur, successful, travels the world, literally. When she was about 8 years old, she came into my home office where I was writing, and she said, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be an artist. When you were my age, you wanted to be a writer, and you are. So I know I can be an artist. And I want to be a mom too, and an artist, but a mom more. And then she trotted out of my office. And I looked at that like this. Because in that moment, I knew I had done something right. Because I have 3 daughters. This child knew that being her mom was my number 1 priority. But also that she could pursue her passion, whatever that was. Now, she's not an artist painting as she thought she might be when she was 8. Her passion has shifted. But she has followed her passion and she is successful with it. And she knew she could. And I am so grateful that on some small level I was an example for her on that. So no. Are Mormons a cult that oppress women and don't let us have brains and education and expect us to pump out 10 plus children? No. No. We're not. We're just not. That's not who we are. That is how some people are. Some members, and they are wrong. That is how some cultural things still linger in some people's minds, but that is not what is coming from the top. That is not the messaging. That is not the doctrine. That is not the policy. And yes, I do know there are issues. I know some women of my generation who married, and not even because they really loved the guy, but because they thought that was the path that they were supposed to do. They were supposed to get married, have a bunch of kids, stay home, and then they would be happy for the rest of their lives. That was the recipe. And then they found out that didn't necessarily promise them bliss. And that is a cultural failing. I think that is a failure of local leaders, especially youth leaders. Sometimes it's a failure of parents, but that's not who we are as an organization. So yeah, tell Sister Renlund, president of a law firm who has one child and worked the entire child's life. No, that's not how this works. That's not who we are. So I'm going to show from President Hinckley now.
Study your options. Pray to the Lord earnestly for direction. Then pursue your course with resolution. The whole gamut of human endeavor is now open to women. There is not anything that you cannot do if you will set your mind to it. You can include in the dream of the woman you would like to be a picture of one qualified to serve society and make a significant contribution to the world of which you will be a part. For you, my dear friends, the sky is the limit. You can be excellent in every way. You can be first class.
The sky is the limit. The sky is the limit. That was from 2001. This is not a cult telling women to shut up and just pump out babies. Do I think there are people like that? Well, clearly. Hannah and Daniel from Ballerina Farm clearly are. They're part of that mentality. I think any organization that's religious will have its extremists. Chad Dable is another example of dangerous extremism. Hopefully Ballerina Farm won't turn into true crime. That is not us. I know every woman that I know who's a Latter-day Saint who read that article is horrified, just like the rest of the world. We are horrified, and that does not reflect our reality or the reality of most women within the church. Is there still progress to be made? Of course, but we've come a long way. That's my Ballerina Farm rant. Yeah, my blood sugar is really low, so I think I'm going to go find myself some Ghirardelli. What are you going to go grab? Because now that I got this out of my system, I'm not so mad, but I still do need to bump up my blood sugar, so... And hopefully get some writing in today, too. So, because also, yeah, don't just do the YouTube thing. I also write. That's a thing. Got to get my next suspense out there. So, if you're stuck around for all of my venting and ranting, please give the video a like. It makes a really big difference for the algorithm powers that be, so people can find the information. If you're new here, please subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss anything. And if you have any questions about what actually is part of the faith, let me know. And yeah, pop those into the comments. I am thinking about doing a live soon that addresses some of those things that wouldn't necessarily fit into my regular videos. Like this didn't really fit my usual content, but I felt like it just had to be said. Go find yourself something sweet.